How did one night out at the club, while wearing my wedding ring, end with a process server handing me divorce papers at work? What did my husband uncover that made him go from silent suffering to taking control? And what did everyone around us really see? This is the story of how I lost everything I thought I could manipulate and justify. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The bass was pounding through my chest as I adjusted my wedding ring, making sure it caught the club's neon lights just right. I wasn't trying to hide it, quite the opposite. There was something thrilling about the attention I got while wearing it, like I was breaking some unspoken rule and loving every second of it. "Eirene, you look amazing tonight," Lauren shouted over the music, her eyes sparkling with mischief. My younger sister had always been my biggest cheerleader, especially when it came to pushing boundaries. "Simon's lucky to have you." I glanced over at my husband, who was nursing his second beer at our table, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Simon had never been the club type, but I'd insisted we come out tonight. After 7 years of marriage and a demanding job as an administrative assistant, I deserved some fun, didn't I? "He doesn't look like he's having a good time," I said to Lauren, rolling my eyes. "Sometimes I think he forgets I'm still a woman, not just his wife and Lila's mom." That's when I spotted Kellen across the dance floor, Simon's old friend from college, tall and charismatic, with that easy smile that had always made my stomach flutter. He caught my eye and started making his way over, weaving through the crowd with confidence. "Well, well, if it isn't the beautiful Mrs. Veyra," Kellen said, his voice smooth as silk. "Mind if I steal you for a dance?" I felt Simon's eyes on us, but I was already standing up. "Just one song," I said, loud enough for Simon to hear. "My husband doesn't dance anyway." The lie came so easily. Simon used to love dancing with me when we were dating, but that felt like a lifetime ago. Now he was always tired, always stressed about work or bills or our daughter's school activities. When was the last time he'd made me feel desired? On the dance floor, Kellen's hands found my waist, and I let him pull me closer than I probably should have. The music was intoxicating, the attention from other clubgoers even more so. I could feel eyes on us, could sense the energy of people wondering who I was, if I was available. "You still move like you're 25, Kellen whispered in my ear, his breath warm against my neck. I laughed, spinning around so my back was against his chest. "I feel 25 tonight." Through the crowd, I caught glimpses of Simon. His jaw was tight, his knuckles white around his beer bottle. Good, I thought. Maybe this would remind him what he had at home. Maybe he'd remember that other men still wanted me. The song ended, but Kellen didn't let go immediately. "Another one?" he asked. I should have said no. I should have gone back to my husband. Instead, I nodded. The second song was slower, more intimate. Kellen's hands traveled lower on my waist, and I didn't stop him. Around us, other couples were grinding against each other, lost in the music and the moment. I let myself get lost too. "Your husband's watching," Kellen murmured. "Let him watch," I replied, surprising myself with my boldness. Maybe he'll learn something. When I finally returned to our table 20 minutes later, flushed and breathless, Simon was gone. Our friends were still there, Lauren, Dina from my office, and a few others, but my husband had vanished. "Where's Simon?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "He said he had a headache," Dina replied, not looking up from her phone. "Left about 10 minutes ago." Lauren grabbed my arm, grinning. "Girl, you were on fire out there. Kellen couldn't keep his hands off you." "It was just dancing," I said, but I was smiling. The attention had felt incredible, like I was myself again instead of just someone's wife and mother. "Simon looked pretty upset," one of our friends mentioned. I waved dismissively. "He's just tired. He never wants to have fun anymore." But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the image of Simon's face when he'd left. There had been something different in his expression, not just hurt or anger, but something colder, more calculating. I pushed the thought away. Simon was passive, always had been. He'd sulk for a day or two, then things would go back to normal. They always did. When I finally got home at 2 a.m, the house was dark. Simon's car was in the driveway, but he wasn't in our bed. I found him in the guest room, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. "Simon," I whispered, "are you okay?" He didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless. "Did you have fun tonight, Eirene?" "It was just dancing," I said quickly. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." "Nothing," he repeated slowly. "Right." I waited for him to say more, to start the fight I was prepared for. Instead, he rolled over, turning his back to me. "Simon, don't be like this. You're being ridiculous." Still nothing. I stood there for a few more minutes, waiting for a response that never came. Finally, I went to our bedroom alone, telling myself that he'd get over it. He always did. But as I lay in bed, still wearing my wedding ring that had caught so much attention tonight, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed. Simon's silence felt different this time. Not defeated, but purposeful. I had no idea that while I was grinding against strangers and letting Kellen's hands wander, my husband was quietly taking mental notes of everything he saw. I didn't know that he'd left early, not because he was hurt, but because he'd seen enough. And I certainly didn't know that he'd already started planning his next move. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Simon making breakfast downstairs. For a moment, I felt relieved. Maybe last night hadn't been as big a deal as I'd thought. Maybe we could just move past it like we always did. But when I walked into the kitchen, Simon barely looked up from the stove. He was making pancakes for our 7-year-old daughter Lila, who was sitting at the table in her pajamas, looking smaller than usual. "Morning," I said brightly, trying to inject some normalcy into the atmosphere. "Morning, Mummy," Lila said quietly, but she didn't smile like she usually did. Simon just nodded, not meeting my eyes. I poured myself coffee and sat down next to Lila, ruffling her hair. "What are we doing today, baby girl?" "Daddy said we might go to the park," she said, glancing between us nervously. "Are you coming too?" Before I could answer, Simon spoke up. "Mummy might be tired from her late night out." The words were neutral, but the tone carried an edge that made Lila shrink back slightly. I felt a flash of anger. He had no right to make our daughter uncomfortable because of his jealousy. "I'm not tired at all," I said firmly. "Of course I'll come to the park." Simon finally looked at me then, and what I saw in his eyes made me uncomfortable. It wasn't the hurt or anger I expected. It was something colder, more analytical, like he was studying me. After breakfast, while Lila was getting dressed, I cornered Simon in the laundry room. "Okay, let's talk about this," I said, crossing my arms. "You're obviously upset about last night." "Am I?" he asked mildly, continuing to fold towels. "Simon, come on. You left the club without saying goodbye, you slept in the guest room, and now you're giving me the silent treatment. Just say what you're thinking." He set down the towel he was folding and turned to face me. "What I'm thinking is that my wife spent the evening grinding against another man while wearing her wedding ring. And when I tried to talk to her about it, she told me I was making a big deal out of nothing." "It was just dancing," I protested. "You're acting like I cheated on you." "Is that what you call it? Dancing?" His calm tone was infuriating. I preferred when Simon got emotional. It made him easier to handle, easier to turn things around on him. "Yes, that's what I call it, because that's what it was. Kellen is your friend, for God's sake. And even if it wasn't, I'm allowed to have fun. I'm allowed to feel attractive and alive, instead of like some boring suburban housewife." "No one's stopping you from having fun, Eirene." "Aren't you? When's the last time you told me I looked beautiful? When's the last time you touched me like you actually wanted me, instead of like it was some obligation?" I was getting worked up now, falling into familiar patterns. When Simon got quiet like this, I'd learned to go on the offensive, to make him feel guilty for questioning me. "So this is my fault," he said. It wasn't a question. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying that maybe if you paid more attention to your wife, she wouldn't need to get attention elsewhere. Simon was quiet for a long moment, and I thought I'd gotten through to him. Then he asked, "Did you delete any messages from your phone last night?" The question caught me off guard. What? No, why would I? What kind of question is that? Just wondering. But I had deleted messages. Kellen had texted me after I got home, saying how much he'd enjoyed dancing with me and asking if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I deleted the whole conversation thread, just to be safe. How could Simon possibly know that? "You're being paranoid," I said, but my voice sounded less confident than I wanted it to. "Maybe," Simon agreed, "or maybe I'm finally paying attention." The rest of the day was tense. We went to the park as planned, but Simon was distant, and Lila seemed to pick up on the atmosphere. She stayed close to her father, holding his hand instead of running around like she usually did. That evening, after Lila was in bed, I tried again. "Simon, this is ridiculous. We can't keep going like this over one night of dancing." He was sitting at his computer, working on something. "You're right," he said without looking up. "We can't." Relief flooded through me. "Good. So we can move past this?" "Sure." But something in his tone made me lean over to see what he was working on. It looked like a spreadsheet, with dates and times and notes I couldn't quite read from my angle. "What's that?" "Just work stuff," he said, minimizing the window. But I'd caught enough to see that it wasn't work stuff at all. I'd seen my name and dates and what looked like a timeline of some kind. "Simon, what are you doing?" "Nothing for you to worry about," he said, finally looking at me. "Just keeping track of things." "Keeping track of what things?" "Details. You'd be surprised how easy it is to forget details when you're not paying attention." A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't the Simon I knew, the passive, conflict-avoiding husband who usually let me steer our arguments toward resolution. This Simon was calm, methodical, almost clinical. Are you spying on me?" "I'm observing," he corrected. "There's a difference." "That's insane, Simon. You can't just..." "Can't what?" "Pay attention to my wife's behavior. Notice when she comes home at 2 a.m, smelling like another man's cologne. Keep track of when she lies to me about where she's been. I haven't lied to you about anything." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. There had been small lies, little omissions. Times when I'd said I was working late but had actually gone for drinks with Dina. Conversations with Kellen that I'd downplayed or not mentioned at all. Simon just looked at me, and I could see in his eyes that he knew I was lying. Somehow, he knew. "I think," he said carefully, "that we both need some time to think about what we want from this marriage." With that, he closed his laptop and walked upstairs, leaving me standing in the living room with my heart pounding. That night, he slept in the guest room again, and as I lay alone in our bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seriously underestimated my husband. The next morning, my phone rang early. It was Simon's mother, Helen. "Eirene, dear," she said in that tone that always made me feel like I was being judged. "I heard you all went out to that club Friday night." My stomach dropped. "Who told you that?" "Simon mentioned it. He seemed quite upset." "It was nothing, Helen. We were just having fun with friends." "I see." There was a long pause. "Well, I do hope you're being mindful of your family's reputation and your marriage vows." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in shock. Simon had talked to his mother about this. He never involved his parents in our problems, unless he wasn't treating this as just another marital spat, unless he was building a case. Sunday lunch at Simon's parents' house had always been a minefield, but today felt particularly treacherous. Eirene Veyra had that tight smile she wore when she was barely containing her disapproval, while Martin, Simon's father, was being overly jovial in that way that meant he was trying to keep the peace. Lila was playing quietly in the corner, but I could see her watching the adults with those big, worried eyes that broke my heart. She'd been clingy all weekend, asking if Mommy and Daddy were fighting. I'd assured her everything was fine, but kids always know when you're lying. "So, Eirene," Helen said as she passed the roast beef, "Simon tells me you've been going out quite a bit lately." I felt Simon's eyes on me from across the table. He'd been watching me constantly since Friday night, and it was starting to make me paranoid. "Just normal socializing," I said carefully. "It's healthy for married couples to have their own interests." "Of course," Helen agreed, but her tone suggested otherwise. Though I've always believed that a wife's primary interest should be her family. "Helen," Martin warned gently. "What? I'm just saying that in my day, we didn't need to go grinding against strangers in nightclubs to feel fulfilled." The word grinding hung in the air like a slap. I felt my face burn with embarrassment and anger. "Excuse me?" "You heard me, dear." I looked at Simon, who was calmly cutting his meat as if his mother hadn't just insulted me at the dinner table. "Are you going to let her talk to me like that?" "Like what?" Simon asked mildly. "She's just expressing her opinion." "Her opinion? She just accused me of..." "Of what exactly?" Helen interrupted. "What did you do that you're so defensive about?" I felt trapped. If I protested too much, I'd look guilty. If I didn't defend myself, I'd look guilty. And Simon was just sitting there, letting it happen. "I danced with some friends," I said through gritted teeth. "That's not a crime." "No," Helen agreed, "but adultery is a sin." "Helen," Martin said sharply. "I didn't commit adultery," I snapped, my voice louder than I'd intended. Lila looked up from her toys, startled. "Lower your voice," Simon said quietly. "You're scaring Lila." The hypocrisy was unbelievable. His mother was attacking me, and I was the one being told to calm down. "Maybe I should help with the dishes," I said, standing abruptly. "I'll help," Helen said, following me into the kitchen. The moment we were alone, she turned on me. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, young lady, but my son is not a fool." "I'm not playing any game, Helen. I went out with friends and danced. That's it." "That's it?" She laughed bitterly. "You spent the evening rubbing yourself against another man while wearing my son's ring, and you think that's nothing? Who told you that? Does it matter? Half the people at that club probably took pictures. Do you know how humiliating that is for Simon?" I hadn't thought about pictures. In today's social media world, everything ended up online eventually. My stomach churned as I realized there might be evidence of Friday night that I couldn't control or delete. "Simon is overreacting," I said weakly. "Is he? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my son's wife is having an affair with his former friend, and she's not even trying to hide it." "I am not having an affair." "Then what do you call it?" "I call it dancing. I call it having fun. I call it feeling like a woman instead of just a mother and a wife for one night." Helen's expression softened slightly. "Eirene, I understand that marriage can feel restrictive sometimes. But you made vows. You have a child. You can't just..." "Can't just what? Live my life, feel attractive, get attention from someone who actually notices I exist. Is that what this is about? You don't feel noticed?" I was crying now, which I hated. I didn't want Helen to see me vulnerable. "When's the last time Simon told me I was beautiful? When's the last time he looked at me the way Kellen did Friday night? I'm 34 years old, Helen. I'm not ready to be invisible." Helen handed me a tissue. "So, talk to your husband about it. Go to counseling. Don't humiliate him in public." "I didn't mean to humiliate anyone." "But you did, and now Simon is talking to lawyers." My blood went cold. "What?" "You heard me. My son isn't the pushover you think he is, Eirene. When he's pushed too far, he pushes back." I stumbled back to the dining room, my mind reeling. Simon was talking to lawyers. About what? Divorce? Custody? The rest of lunch passed in a blur. I barely spoke, barely ate. Simon seemed perfectly normal, chatting with his father about work, helping Lila with her food. But I kept watching him, looking for signs of the man who was apparently building a legal case against me. On the drive home, I finally confronted him. "Your mother says you're talking to lawyers." "My mother talks too much sometimes," Simon replied, not taking his eyes off the road. "Simon, are you planning to divorce me? Over one night of dancing? Is that what you think this is about? One night? What else would it be about?" He pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. In the back seat, Lila had fallen asleep. "Eirene, do you remember last month when you said you were working late on the Morrison account?" My heart started racing. "Yes." "But you weren't working late, were you?" What are you talking about?" "You were at Murphy's bar with Kellen. I know because I drove by your office at 8 o'clock, and your car wasn't there. Then I called the restaurant to make a reservation for our anniversary, and the hostess mentioned seeing you there with a tall, dark-haired man who definitely wasn't me. I felt sick." "Simon, that was nothing. We were just talking." "About what?" "I don't remember. Work stuff, probably." "Work stuff, right." He got out of the car and carefully lifted Lila, carrying her toward the house. "The thing is, Eirene, I'm starting to remember a lot of things, and I'm writing them all down." That night, after Lila was in bed, I tried to find Simon's laptop. I needed to see what he'd been writing, what kind of case he was building. But the computer was password protected now, and when I tried a few obvious passwords, I was locked out. When Simon came upstairs, I was sitting on our bed, waiting for him. "We need to talk," I said. "Do we?" "Simon, please. I know things have been strained between us lately, but we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can..." "Can what?" "Can pretend that you haven't been lying to me for months. Can pretend that you're not in love with another man." "I'm not in love with Kellen." "No? Then what is it? Just sex?" "There's no sex." "God, Simon, why won't you believe me?" "Because I'm not stupid, Eirene, and I'm not blind, and I'm definitely not going to sit back and watch my wife destroy our family for some midlife crisis fantasy." He headed for the guest room again, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't walk away from me. We're married, Simon. We have a daughter together. We have a life together." "Yes," he agreed. "We do. And I'm going to protect that life. I'm going to protect Lila, even if that means protecting her from you." The threat was unmistakable. I let go of his arm, shocked. "You can't take my daughter away from me." "I can if you're an unfit mother. And a woman who prioritizes her affair over her child's stability might be considered unfit." "I don't have an affair." But he was already walking away, leaving me alone with the horrible realization that my quiet, passive husband had become someone I didn't recognize at all, someone who might actually be dangerous. Monday morning at work felt like a refuge. At least here, I could pretend everything was normal. Dina was already at her desk when I arrived, and she immediately pounced on me for details about the weekend. "So, how did Simon handle Friday night? Is he still pouting?" I slumped into my chair, exhausted from another sleepless night. Simon had been up until nearly 3 in the morning, typing on his laptop in the guest room. I'd heard the keyboard clicking through the thin walls. "He's being weird," I admitted. "More than usual. He's talking about lawyers and keeping some kind of record of my activities." Dina rolled her eyes. Typical controlling husband behavior. My ex used to do the same thing, tracking my every move, questioning every conversation. It's psychological abuse, Eirene. "You think?" "Absolutely. He's trying to make you feel guilty for having a social life. Don't let him gaslight you." The word gaslight stuck with me. Was that what Simon was doing, making me question my own reality? Because I was starting to feel crazy, constantly second-guessing myself and wondering what he knew. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Kellen. "Coffee today? I can't stop thinking about Friday night." I stared at the message for a long time. The smart thing would be to ignore it, to put some distance between us until things cooled down with Simon. But Dina was right. I shouldn't have to isolate myself just because my husband was being paranoid. I texted back, "Sure. Murphy's Cafe at noon?" Perfect. Can't wait to see you. I deleted the conversation immediately, just like I'd been doing for weeks. It was easier that way. No evidence, no uncomfortable questions. At lunch, I told Dina I had a dentist appointment and would be back in an hour. It was a small lie, harmless really. I was just protecting everyone from unnecessary drama. Kellen was already waiting when I arrived at Murphy's, sitting in a corner booth with that easy smile that had always made my knees weak. He stood up when he saw me, and for a moment I thought he might hug me. Instead, he gestured to the seat across from him. "You look tired," he said, his voice full of concern. "Thanks. Every woman loves to hear that." "I'm serious, Eirene. You seem stressed." I found myself pouring out everything. Simon's strange behavior, the surveillance, the threats about custody. Kellen listened intently, occasionally reaching across the table to touch my hand. "He's trying to intimidate you," Kellen said finally. "Guys like Simon, when they feel threatened, they lash out, but he's bluffing." "How can you be so sure?" "Because what's he actually going to say? That his wife danced with another man? That she had coffee with a friend? There's nothing illegal about that." "But what if he has pictures? Or witnesses?" Kellen's expression shifted slightly. "Pictures of what?" "Of us dancing. Of us being close." "So what? We're both adults. We haven't done anything wrong." But even as he said it, I could see doubt creeping into his eyes, and I realized that while I was falling deeper into the situation, Kellen was starting to think about his own exposure. "Maybe we should be more careful," I said. "Careful about what? We're friends, Eirene. We've known each other for years." "Friends don't usually dance the way we danced Friday night." He leaned back, studying me. "Are you having second thoughts?" "I don't know. Maybe. Simon's really freaking me out." "Look," Kellen said, his voice lower now, "I like you. I've always liked you. But if you're not ready for this, whatever this is, then maybe we should take a step back." "Is that what you want?" "What I want is for you to be happy, but I'm not going to be the reason your marriage falls apart." The irony wasn't lost on me. Kellen was being more considerate of my marriage than I was. When I got back to the office, I felt unsettled. The conversation hadn't gone the way I'd expected. Instead of reassuring me, Kellen had seemed almost eager to distance himself from the situation. "How was the dentist?" Dina asked. "Fine, just a cleaning." But as soon as I said it, I remembered that I'd used the dentist excuse before. Had I told Simon I was at the dentist when I was really meeting Kellen? The lies were starting to blur together. That evening, Simon was waiting for me in the kitchen when I got home. "How was your day?" he asked pleasantly. "Good. Busy." "I called your office around noon to see if you wanted to grab lunch. Dina said you were at the dentist." My mouth went dry. "Yes, just a routine cleaning." "Funny thing though, I called Dr. Peterson's office to confirm your appointment time, in case there were any complications, and they said you weren't scheduled today." The room felt like it was spinning. Maybe they made a mistake. Maybe, or maybe you went to a different dentist. "No, I must have gotten confused about the day." Simon nodded slowly. "That happens. Memory can be tricky." He pulled out his phone and showed me something on the screen. It was a photo, taken from across the street, of me walking into Murphy's cafe. "Especially when you're trying to keep track of multiple stories," he continued. I stared at the photo, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "Were you following me?" "I was in the neighborhood. Imagine my surprise when I saw my wife, who was supposed to be at the dentist, meeting another man for what looked like a very intimate conversation." "It wasn't intimate. We're friends." "Friends who lie about seeing each other?" I couldn't answer that. Any response I gave would only make things worse. "Eirene," Simon said, his voice almost gentle, "I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Are you having an affair with Kellen?" I looked into my husband's eyes and saw something there that terrified me. Not anger, not hurt, but a kind of cold certainty, like he already knew the answer and was just giving me one last chance to be honest. "No," I whispered, "I'm not having an affair." Simon nodded again, but this time there was something final in the gesture, like a door closing. "Okay," he said. "Thank you for clarifying that." He walked away, leaving me standing in the kitchen with the horrible realization that I'd just failed some kind of test. And whatever came next was going to be entirely out of my control. The tension in our house had become suffocating. Simon continued his routine, making breakfast, helping Lila with homework, going to work, but it was like living with a ghost. He spoke to me only when necessary, and always with that same polite, distant tone that was somehow worse than yelling would have been. Lila was suffering the most. She'd started having nightmares and asking if we were getting divorced, like her friend Madison's parents. Each time, I assured her everything was fine, but I could see she didn't believe me. It had been 3 days since the dentist incident, and I was starting to think maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe Simon was just going through something and would eventually calm down. Maybe we could still work this out. That hope died on Thursday evening. I was in the living room, helping Leila with her math homework, when Simon came downstairs carrying a manila folder and his laptop. He set them on the coffee table with deliberate precision. "Lila, sweetheart," he said gently, "why don't you go finish your homework in your room? Mommy and Daddy need to talk." "Are you going to fight?" she asked in a small voice. "No fighting," Simon promised. "Just talking." After Lila reluctantly went upstairs, Simon sat down across from me. The folder lay between us like a weapon. "What's that?" I asked, though I already suspected I didn't want to know. "Evidence," Simon said simply. He opened the folder and began laying out papers. Phone bills with calls to Kellen highlighted in yellow. Credit card statements showing charges at restaurants during times I'd claimed to be working late. Printouts of text message logs that somehow showed deleted conversations. "How did you get these?" I whispered. "The phone records are from our joint account. The credit card statements are from our joint account." The text message recovery was surprisingly easy. Everything's backed up to the cloud these days. My hands were shaking as I looked at the evidence of my deception, laid out in black and white. Months of small lies, secret meetings, deleted conversations. It looked so much worse when compiled like this. "Simon, I can explain—" "Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain this." He pulled out another sheet of paper. It was a timeline, meticulously detailed, showing every discrepancy between what I'd told him and what I'd actually been doing. March 15th, claimed to be working late on Morrison account. Actually at Murphy's Bar with Kellen Dre from 7:30 to 10:15 p.m. Paid for drinks on joint credit card. April 2nd, claimed to have book club. No book club scheduled that week according to library records. Phone shows 2-hour call with Kellen Dre during supposed meeting time. April 18th, claimed dentist appointment, no appointment scheduled. Security footage from Murphy's Cafe shows lunch meeting with Kellen Dre. He went on, reading each entry in that same calm, methodical voice. 6 months of lies, all documented with timestamps and evidence. "Stop," I finally said. "Just stop." "Why? Does the truth make you uncomfortable?" "You're making me sound like some kind of criminal." "Are you? A criminal?" "No. I'm a woman who's been feeling neglected and lonely, and I found someone who makes me feel valued. That's not a crime, Simon." "You're right, it's not a crime, but adultery is grounds for divorce, and lying to your spouse is grounds for questioning your fitness as a parent." The threat hit me like a physical blow. "You can't take Lila away from me." "Can't I?" He opened his laptop and turned it toward me. "These are photos from Friday night at the club. Notice the hand placement, the body contact, the way you're looking at each other." The photos were damning. In one, Kellen's hands were clearly on my ass while we danced. In another, I was grinding against him with an expression of pure lust on my face. I looked like a woman who was definitely not just dancing with a friend. Where did you get these? Social media is amazing these days. People post everything. These were on Instagram within hours of being taken. Simon, please, it's not what it looks like. Really? What does it look like to you? I stared at the photos, trying to find some innocent explanation, but there wasn't one. I looked like exactly what I was, a married woman having an affair. I never slept with him, I said desperately. Yet. The word hung between us like a blade. I wasn't going to... Weren't you? Because according to these text messages, you were planning to meet him at his apartment next week while I was at the IT conference in Chicago. He showed me my own words, recovered from the cloud backup I'd forgotten about. Simon will be out of town Tuesday. We could finally have some real privacy. I felt like I was drowning. Every defense I tried to mount crumbled under the weight of evidence I hadn't even known existed. You've been spying on me for months, I said, grasping for some moral high ground. I've been paying attention to my wife for months. There's a difference. This is insane, Simon. You're acting like some kind of stalker. Am I? Or am I acting like a husband who's trying to save his marriage and protect his child? By building a legal case against me. By documenting the truth, because I've learned that you'll lie about anything, Eirene. You'll look me in the eye and lie about where you've been, who you've seen, what you've done. So now I need evidence. The worst part was that he was right. I had been lying constantly and easily. I'd become someone I didn't recognize, a person who could deceive the father of my child without a second thought. What do you want from me? I asked. I want you to choose. Choose what? Your family or your fantasy, me or Kellen, this marriage or whatever it is you think you're going to have with him. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. You can't have both, Eirene. You can't keep me as your safety net while you explore other options. I looked at the evidence spread across our coffee table, months of betrayal documented in excruciating detail. I thought about Lila upstairs, probably listening to every word. I thought about the divorce papers Simon was clearly prepared to file, the custody battle that would destroy our daughter's sense of security. I choose you, I said quietly. I choose our family. Simon studied my face for a long moment. Do you? Or are you just choosing the path of least resistance? I mean it, Simon. I'll end things with Kellen. I'll do whatever you want. What I want is for none of this to have happened, but since we can't change the past, what I need is for you to understand that there are consequences for your choices. What kind of consequences? Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. We both froze, looking at each other in confusion. It was nearly 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. Who would be visiting this late? Simon got up to answer the door, and I heard voices in the hallway. When he returned, he wasn't alone. A woman in a business suit was with him, carrying an official-looking briefcase. Eirene Veyra, the woman asked. Yes? You've been served. She handed me a thick envelope and left without another word. With trembling hands, I opened it and found divorce papers, a custody petition, and a temporary restraining order requiring me to stay away from Kellen Dre. Simon, I whispered, staring at the documents. What have you done? What I should have done months ago, he replied. I've taken control of the situation. As I read through the papers, I realized that my quiet, passive husband had outmaneuvered me completely. While I'd been playing games and telling lies, he'd been building an airtight case that painted me as an unfit mother and unfaithful wife. And the most terrifying part was that every word of it was true. The law office of Henderson and Associates felt like a courtroom, all dark wood and intimidating law books. I sat across from Simon and his lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Henderson, who looked like she ate cheating spouses for breakfast. My own lawyer, a public defender, named James Walsh, who'd been assigned to me because I couldn't afford anyone better, seemed nervous. He'd already warned me that Simon's case was quite comprehensive and that our best strategy was to minimize the damage. It had been 2 weeks since I'd been served, 2 weeks of living in a hotel because Simon had gotten a temporary restraining order that kept me out of our house. I'd been allowed supervised visitation with Lila, but she barely spoke to me during our awkward meetings at the Family Services office. Mrs. Veyra, Patricia Henderson began, my client has provided extensive documentation of your extramarital affair. Would you like to dispute any of these allegations? She slid a folder across the table. Inside were all the photos, text messages, phone records, and timeline entries I'd seen before, plus new evidence I hadn't known existed. Security camera footage from Kellen's apartment building, showing me entering and leaving multiple times. Screenshots of social media posts where I'd been tagged at locations I'd lied about. Even a recording of a conversation between me and my sister Lauren, where I'd admitted to being emotionally done with Simon and excited about finally having someone who appreciates me. "Where did you get this recording?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Your husband has been quite thorough in documenting the breakdown of your marriage," Henderson replied. "The recording was made in your marital home, which is perfectly legal." I looked at Simon, sitting calmly beside his lawyer. "You recorded me in our own house?" "I recorded conversations in my house," he corrected, "after I discovered you were lying to me about your whereabouts and activities." That's invasion of privacy." "Actually," Henderson interjected, "in this state, it's legal to record conversations in your own home. And given that you were using that home as a base for conducting your affair, lying about your location while actually meeting with Mr. Dre, the recordings are highly relevant to custody considerations." My lawyer finally spoke up. "My client admits that she made some poor choices, but there's no evidence of any sexual relationship. These are allegations of emotional infidelity at most." Henderson smiled coldly. "I'm afraid that's not accurate." She pulled out another folder, and my heart sank. Inside were photos I'd never seen before, images of me and Kellen in his apartment, taken through a window. In one, we were kissing on his couch. In another, my shirt was off. "These were taken last Tuesday," Henderson said, the day Mrs. Veyra told her husband she was attending a work training seminar. I felt like I was going to vomit. "How did you get these?" "Private investigator," Simon said simply. "I hired him after you lied about the dentist appointment." The room was spinning. I'd been so careful, or so I thought, but Simon had been 3 steps ahead of me the entire time. "Mrs. Veyra," Henderson continued, "we also have an affidavit from Mr. Kellen Dre." "Kellen gave you an affidavit?" "Mr. Dre was quite cooperative once he understood the legal implications of his involvement with a married woman. He's provided a detailed account of your relationship, including dates, locations, and the nature of your physical intimacy." She handed me the document, and I read Kellen's statement in growing horror. He'd thrown me completely under the bus, describing me as the aggressor who had pursued him relentlessly, despite his concerns about the appropriateness of the relationship. According to Kellen's version of events, I had been the one pushing for physical intimacy, lying about my marriage being over, and pressuring him to meet in secret. He painted himself as a reluctant participant who had tried multiple times to end the relationship. "He's lying," I said desperately. "He pursued me. He was the one who wanted to meet." "Do you have any evidence to support that claim?" Henderson asked. Of course I didn't. I'd deleted everything, thinking I was protecting myself. Instead, I'd eliminated the only evidence that might have shown Kellen's equal culpability. "Mrs. Veyra," the mediator said gently, "given the evidence presented, we need to discuss custody arrangements and asset division. Your husband is seeking primary custody of your daughter, with supervised visitation for you pending completion of counseling and therapy." "You can't take my daughter away from me." "No one's taking her away," Simon said, speaking for the first time in an hour. "But she needs stability. She needs to know that her home is secure and that her parents aren't going to destroy her world for their own selfish reasons." "I never meant for any of this to happen." But it did happen, Eirene. You made choices, and choices have consequences. Henderson slid another folder across the table. We also need to address finances. You used marital funds to support the affair, meals, hotels, gifts, roughly $8,000. Seeing it itemized made it impossible to hide from. $8,000 of our family's money, spent on a fantasy while Simon worked overtime to keep the mortgage and Lila's school paid. Then he added the part that hurt worse. Lila had been in therapy. Dr. Martinez documented nightmares, anxiety, regression, bedwetting, and the question no child should ask: whether it was her fault that Mommy didn't love Daddy anymore. I do love him, I said, but it sounded empty even to me. Do you? Simon asked. Because I have 6 months of evidence that says you didn't act like it. 4 hours later, mediation ended with my life reduced to terms. Simon got primary custody, the house, and most assets. I agreed to supervised visitation every other weekend, individual therapy, and repaying the money. Outside, I tried one last time. Simon, please. 7 years. Leela, that has to count. It does, he said quietly. It's why you'll still be in her life. But it's not enough to rebuild a marriage with someone who lied to my face for 6 months. I can change. I hope you do, he said, for Leela, but I can't forget. That night I called Kellen, needing to understand why his affidavit made me sound like the one who pushed everything. He didn't even pretend to be brave. I had to protect myself, he said. Your husband was talking about lawsuits. My lawyer told me to minimize my involvement. You threw me under the bus. Long pause. Then the cold truth. What did you think would happen? You're married. You have a kid. This was always going to end badly. When I said I'd lost everything, he answered, I'm sorry, but that's not my fault, and hung up. 6 months later, I was in a small apartment, working extra hours to pay for therapy and support. I saw Lila every other weekend. Slowly, painfully, we started rebuilding. Simon was dating someone stable, and Lila sounded calmer when she mentioned her, like she was finally healing. And me? I stopped calling my choices happiness. I started calling them what they were, selfishness wrapped in excuses. The club night that felt like freedom was just the first crack in the life I said I valued. The papers ended my old life. The hard part was accepting I'd signed the ending long before they were served.